Marsh sat in the waiting room of Galactic Union Medical Station Theta 7 and tried not to think about what the doctors might find inside his lung. He was 34 years old, a cargo pilot who had spent the last 6 years hauling supplies between trading posts in neutral space. He had never been sick a day in his life until the routine scan 3 weeks ago showed something that shouldn't be there. The waiting room was large and circular, designed to accommodate dozens of different species. Sat in a chair meant for humans, but next to him was a massive stone bench for the rock-like, and across the room were hanging perches for the bird-like. The air smelled strange, a mix of different atmospheric compounds pumped through separate vents to keep everyone comfortable. Watch the other patients come and go. A female walked past, her 4 arms carrying medical documents while her blue skin shimmered under the artificial lights. 2 small, insect-like creatures barely 3 feet tall clicked and buzzed to each other in their own language. A massive, covered in thick gray hide and standing nearly 8 feet tall, sat alone in the corner and stared at nothing. Humans were still new to the galactic community. First contact had happened only 40 years ago, when an exploration vessel found Earth and introduced humanity to a universe filled with thousands of intelligent species. In the grand scale of galactic civilization, humans were practically infants, and many species still didn't know what to make of them. Notice some of the other patients watching him with curiosity or suspicion. Humans had developed a strange reputation in recent years. They came from what other species called a planet with high gravity, extreme weather, dangerous predators, and a dozen other things that should have killed them long ago. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived on such a world made other species nervous. A news screen on the wall showed images of warships moving through space. The Dominion, a militaristic empire of bear-like creatures, had been pushing into neutral territory for months. Diplomatic talks had broken down, and everyone feared that full-scale war was coming. Tried not to think about it. He had enough to worry about with the thing growing in his lung. A door slid open and a physician stepped into the waiting room. She was tall and elegant, with 4 arms and large dark eyes that seemed to look right through people. Her name was Doctor, and she had been treating since he arrived at the station. "Marsh," she called, her voice calm and professional. Stood up and walked toward her. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to move with confidence. He was a pilot. He had flown through asteroid fields and solar storms. He could handle a simple medical procedure. Doctor led him down a long corridor to the preoperative area. The walls were white and clean, lined with medical equipment that didn't recognize. Nurses from different species moved between rooms, checking on patients and preparing for procedures. "The biopsy will be quick and painless," Doctor explained as they walked. "We will insert a small probe through your chest wall and extract a tissue sample. You will be sedated for the procedure and should wake up within an hour." Nodded, "And if it's something bad?" Doctor paused and looked at him with those large dark eyes. "Let us focus on the procedure first. We will discuss results when we have them." Appreciated that she didn't try to give him false comfort. He had met enough doctors to know when they were hiding something, and Doctor seemed like the type who would give him the truth, whatever it was. They entered a small room with a medical bed in the center. A nurse named was already there, preparing instruments on a metal tray. Was small and quick, with compound eyes and delicate antennae that twitched as entered. "Please remove your outer clothing and put on the gown," said, gesturing to a folded garment on the bed. "Doctor will return shortly to begin the procedure." Changed into the thin medical gown while worked. Through a large observation window, he could see the stars and the dark curve of the planet below. It was a beautiful view, and for a moment forgot about his fear. Then he noticed something strange. Security personnel were moving through the corridor outside, walking quickly and speaking into communication devices. Their body language was tense and urgent. "Is something happening?" asked. Looked up briefly but said nothing. The little nurse continued preparing instruments, but noticed that her antennae were twitching faster than before. Doctor returned and began attaching monitoring devices to his chest and arms. "We will begin the sedation now," she said. "Please try to relax." Lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. A machine beside him began to hum, and he felt a cool sensation spreading through his veins. His thoughts started to slow down, and the fear that had been gripping his chest began to fade. Then the alarm started. The sound was loud and harsh, cutting through the calm atmosphere of the medical room like a knife. Red lights began flashing on the walls, and a mechanical voice spoke in multiple languages. "Emergency. All personnel report to stations. Emergency." Doctor pulled away from and looked at. They exchanged words in a language didn't understand, but he could read the fear on their faces. Sat up, fighting against the drowsiness that was trying to pull him under. "What's happening?" Before anyone could answer, the entire station shook. The tremor was violent and sudden, throwing medical equipment across the room and sending tumbling to the floor. Grabbed the edge of his bed to keep from falling. Through the observation window, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A ship was less than a kilometer from the station. It was massive and dark, covered in weapons and armor plating. Recognized the design from news reports. It was a warship, and it was already firing at the station's defenses. More ships appeared behind it, emerging from nothing like ghosts materializing from the void. A full assault fleet, at least a dozen vessels, surrounding the medical station like predators circling wounded prey. The power flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a dim red glow. More explosions shook the station as the weapons tore through shields and hull plating. Pulled the monitoring devices from his chest and stood up. His legs were unsteady from the partial sedation, but he forced himself to stay upright. He was wearing nothing but a thin medical gown and had no weapons, no armor, and no way to contact help. But Marsh was a human from Earth, a survivor, and he was not about to lie down while innocent people were in danger. Doctor grabbed his arm. "You must stay here. You are in no condition to." Another explosion cut her off. This one was closer and could hear the sound of metal tearing somewhere in the station. Then came another sound, one that made everyone in the room freeze. War cries echoing through the corridors. The boarding had begun. They moved through the station like a storm. Could hear them in the corridors, their heavy footsteps shaking the floor and their deep voices barking commands in a language that sounded like thunder. Screams came from somewhere nearby, followed by the harsh crack of energy weapons. Doctor pushed and toward a side door. "The maintenance corridors," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Go, hide, I must stay with my patients." Wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He was wearing nothing but a medical gown and had no way to fight or help. The best thing he could do was stay out of the way. Led him through the side door and into a narrow passage filled with pipes and cables. The little moved quickly, her compound eyes seeing perfectly in the dim emergency lighting. Followed as best he could, his bare feet cold against the metal floor. They had gone maybe 30 meters when they heard boots behind them. Pulled into an alcove and pressed himself flat against the wall. Two soldiers passed the entrance to the maintenance corridor, their massive bodies blocking the light. They were even larger than had expected, standing nearly 7 feet tall and covered in thick brown fur. Their faces were broad and flat, with small eyes and powerful jaws filled with teeth meant for tearing flesh. Each soldier carried a plasma rifle and wore heavy armor decorated with symbols that didn't recognize. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew they were at the top of the food chain. Held his breath until they passed. Then he continued deeper into the maintenance corridors. They found a supply closet and ducked inside. The room was small and dark, filled with cleaning equipment and spare parts. Closed the door and leaned against it, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. "What do they want?" he whispered. Santini twitched. "I do not know. The Dominion has been threatening neutral space for months, but no one expected them to attack a medical station. There are rules, agreements. This should not be happening." Thought about the news reports he had seen. They were aggressive, yes, but they had always followed the basic laws of galactic civilization. Attacking a hospital was something different, something desperate. He noticed a ventilation grate in the wall and carefully removed it. Through the opening, he could see into a larger corridor. What he saw made his stomach turn. Soldiers were dragging patients from their rooms. A male was being forced to his knees, his 4 arms bound behind his back. 2 elderly were huddled together, clicking in terror as a shouted at them. A young, barely more than a child, was crying as soldiers pulled her away from her mother. His hands clenched into fists. Every instinct told him to do something, to fight, to help. But he was one unarmed human against an army of warriors. Then he saw something that changed everything. A small figure was moving down the corridor, walking unsteadily and looking around with obvious fear. It was but not a soldier. It was a cub, barely 4 feet tall, with light brown fur and wide eyes that were wet with tears. And the cub was carrying a plasma cannon. The weapon was nearly as large as the child, and the cub was struggling to hold it upright. Its small paws gripped the firing mechanism, and could see that the weapon was active, a green light glowing near the barrel. Watched as the cub stumbled past the ventilation grate. It didn't seem to know where it was going. It was just walking, moving away from something terrible that had happened. Made a decision without really thinking about it. He pushed the grate aside and climbed through the opening into the corridor, grabbed at his leg, trying to stop him, but was already gone. The cub heard him and spun around. The plasma cannon came up, pointing directly at its chest. One pull of the trigger and would be nothing but ash. Stopped moving. He raised his hand slowly, palms out, and looked at the cub's face. Past the fear and the raised weapon, he saw something familiar. He saw a child who was terrified and alone, who had probably just watched something horrible happen, and who was holding onto the only thing that made it feel safe. Had no children of his own, but he had nieces and nephews back on Earth. He knew what fear looked like on a young face, no matter what species that face belonged to. "Hey there," said softly. He kept his voice calm and low, the way he would talk to a frightened animal. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The cub's paws were shaking. The cannon wobbled in its grip. "Stay back," the cub said in broken galactic common. "I will shoot, I will." "Didn't move." "I believe you. That's a big weapon. It looks heavy. Your arms must be tired." The cub blinked, confused by his words. It had expected aggression or fear, not gentle conversation. Took a small step forward very slowly. "My name is, what's your name?" The cub said after a long pause, "I am." "Hello, are you hurt? Is there blood anywhere on you?" Shook its head. The cannon lowered slightly, just a few inches, as the cub's attention shifted from fighting to thinking. "Good," said. "That's good. Where are your parents? Where is your family?" The question hit like a physical blow. Face crumpled and tears began streaming down its furry cheeks. "Father is dead," the cub whispered. "The station guards shot him. He fell down and didn't get up again. Mother is not here. She is on the... Father brought me to see the stars." Felt his heart break. This was not a soldier or an enemy. This was a child whose father had just died, alone in a strange place, holding a weapon because it was the only piece of protection available. Knelt down, bringing himself closer to eye level. The cannon was still pointed at him, but he didn't care. "I'm sorry about your father. That must hurt very much." Nodded, unable to speak. "Listen to me. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But holding that weapon must be very tiring, and I don't think you really want to hurt anyone. Am I right?" Hesitated, then nodded again. Smiled gently. "How about we figure this out together? I won't hurt you and you won't hurt me, and maybe we can find somewhere safe to wait until this is all over. Does that sound okay?" For a long moment, just stared at him. The cub was clearly trying to decide whether to trust this strange creature who didn't look or sound like anything from home. Then slowly, the cannon lowered. Small paws let it drop to the floor with a heavy clang. Let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. He reached out carefully and put a hand on shoulder. The cub flinched but didn't pull away. "You're very brave," said. "Now come with me. We need to find somewhere safe." Looked up at him with those wide, wet eyes. "You won't leave me." Shook his head. "I promise, we're in this together now." He picked up the plasma cannon with one hand, keeping it pointed at the ground, and took his paw with the other. Then he led the small cub back toward the maintenance corridor, where a very confused nurse was waiting with 1,000 questions on her face. Stared at the cub with her compound eyes wide and her antennae pressed flat against her head. "Have you lost your mind?" she whispered too. Their people are killing everyone on the station." Kept his voice low. "This is a child. His name is and his father was just killed. He's not our enemy." Pressed close to his leg, clearly frightened by the strange creature. Put a protective hand on the cub's shoulder. "We cannot take her with us," insisted. "If the soldiers find us sheltering one of their young, they will think we kidnapped him. They will kill us." "And if we leave him alone, he'll die," replied. "Either the soldiers will mistake him for an enemy or station security will find him. Either way, he has no chance on his own." Made a clicking sound that had learned meant frustration, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she turned and began moving deeper into the maintenance corridors. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The sounds of fighting echoed through the walls, distant explosions and gunfire that made whimper and press closer too. The human carried the plasma cannon in one hand, though he had no idea how to use it, and kept his other hand on shoulder. They found 2 more survivors along the way. The first was a pregnant female named. She was hiding in a storage room, her 4 hands wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. When she saw with the cub, her face went through a dozen different emotions before settling on confused acceptance. "The human has adopted her," she said to no one in particular. "Of course he has. Humans are insane." The second survivor was an elderly scientist named. He had been working in one of the research laboratories when the attack began and had managed to hide inside a specimen container. His compound eyes were clouded with age, and he moved slowly, but his mind was sharp. "I know why they're here," said as they huddled together in a junction between 2 corridors. I know what they want." Looked at him. "Tell us." Rubbed his antennae together nervously. 3 years ago, a plague began spreading through colonies. It affects only their young. Children between the ages of 2 and 10 die within weeks of infection. There is no cure, and the Dominion scientists have been unable to stop it. Made a small sound. Looked down and saw fear on the cub's face, a new fear on top of everything else. 6 months ago, continued, researchers on this station developed a prototype treatment. Not a cure, but something that could stop the plague from spreading. It uses a unique combination of medical technology and human biological research. It works. "Then why haven't they shared it?" asked. "If children are dying." "Politics," said bitterly. "The Galactic Union refused to share the treatment with the Dominion because they feared it would be used for weapons research. The Dominion demanded access and diplomatic talks collapsed, and now we are here." Looked at the small group around him. A pregnant, an elderly, a scared human nurse, and a cub whose people were dying from a disease that could be cured if only the adults in charge would stop fighting. "They're not here to conquer the station," said slowly. "They're here to save their children." "That does not excuse what they are doing," said. "They are killing innocent people." "No, it doesn't," agreed. "But it changes things. It means there might be a way to end this without more death. Laughed bitterly. And how do you propose to do that? Walk up to the commander and ask nicely. Didn't answer. He was thinking about the cub's father who had brought his child to see the stars and died in a corridor. He was thinking about all the children dying from a plague that could be stopped. He was thinking about the soldiers on this station who had crossed a terrible line because they saw no other choice. He was also thinking about humans and their strange reputation in the galaxy. Survivors, unpredictable, stubborn, dangerous when cornered but also capable of surprising compassion. We need to move, said. The soldiers will be searching everywhere. We need to find a place where we can. He stopped speaking as footsteps echoed from nearby, heavy footsteps. Pushed the others behind him and raised the plasma cannon. He still didn't know how to fire it properly, but he hoped the soldiers wouldn't know that. 3 soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. They were huge and armored, their weapons raised and ready to fire. When they saw standing there in his medical gown, holding a plasma cannon, they seemed genuinely confused. Then one of them noticed hiding behind legs. The soldier's eyes went wide. He shouted something in, and the others lowered their weapons slightly. They began talking rapidly among themselves, their voices a mixture of anger and shock. Didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were asking why a human was protecting a cub. They were asking if this was some kind of trick. Stepped out from behind and spoke in. The cub's voice was small and shaky, but the soldiers listened. Whatever said, it made them exchange uncertain looks. One of the soldiers, clearly the leader, stepped forward. He spoke in heavily accented galactic common. The cub says you saved him. He says you could have left him to die, but you didn't. Why? Looked the soldier in the eyes. Because he's a child, because he was scared and alone and needed help. That's all. The soldier stared at him for a long moment, could see the conflict in those small dark eyes. This was not what the soldier had expected from an enemy. You will come with us, the soldier finally said. All of you, the warlord will decide what to do with you. Felt his stomach drop. Being captured was not part of any plan, but he also knew that fighting was not an option. He lowered the plasma cannon and nodded. We'll come peacefully, but I want your word that no harm will come to anyone in this group, including the cub. The soldier looked at, then back at. Something changed in his expression, a small crack in the warrior facade. You have my word, the soldier said. The warlord will want to meet the human who saved a child. They were marched through the corridors with soldiers on all sides, kept close, one hand on the cub's shoulder, walked with her hands protecting her belly, and supported when the old's legs grew tired. As they walked, noticed other prisoners being held in various rooms. Doctors, patients, staff, all of them terrified, all of them expecting to die. Made a silent promise to himself. He was going to find a way to save them. He didn't know how yet, but he was human, and humans had beaten worse odds before. They reached the main atrium of the station, where they had established their command post. Soldiers filled the large open space, and at the center stood a massive figure who could only be the warlord. He was the biggest had ever seen, standing nearly 8 feet tall with shoulders as wide as a doorway. His fur was gray with age, and his body was covered in scars from countless battles. His eyes were cold and sharp, the eyes of a creature who had killed many and would not hesitate to kill more. When those eyes fell on, the human felt a chill run down his spine. Bring them forward, the warlord commanded. Walked toward him, still wearing nothing but a medical gown, still holding the hand of a cub. The strangest battle of his life was about to begin. The warlord's name was, and he looked at the way a predator looks at something it cannot quite understand. His massive form cast a shadow across the atrium floor, and every soldier in the room stood at attention when he moved. A human, said, his voice like stones grinding together. I have heard stories about your kind, Creatures, survivors against all logic. I did not expect to find one protecting a cub. Stood as straight as he could in his thin medical gown. Was still beside him, the cub's small paw gripping his hand tightly. The cub was alone and frightened, said. I did what anyone would do. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. Anyone? I think not. Most species would have used the child as a hostage. Some would have killed him to prevent problems. You chose differently. Why? Thought about the question. 100 answers went through his mind, practical reasons and philosophical arguments and careful diplomatic phrases. But in the end, he said the simplest truth. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Studied him in silence. Around the atrium, soldiers watched with confused expressions. This was not going the way anyone had expected. The cub tells me his father was one of my boarding commanders, said. A good warrior, a good father. He brought his son on this mission because he wanted the boy to see that we fight for a purpose, not just for blood. And now is dead and his son is being protected by an enemy. I'm not your enemy, said. I was here for a medical procedure. I'm a cargo pilot. I haul supplies between trading posts. I've never fought anyone in my life. Yet here you stand, facing a warlord of the Dominion, speaking without fear. Either you are very brave or very foolish. Probably both, admitted. His face twitched in what might have been amusement. He turned away and walked toward a large window that overlooked the stars. Could see warships holding position around the station, their weapons still glowing with recent fire. Do you know why we are here, human? Asked without turning around. The plague, said. Your children are dying and this station has a treatment that could save them. Turned back, surprise flickering across his features. You know about the plague. One of the survivors told me, a scientist. His eyes found in the small group of prisoners. The old shrank back, but his attention returned too. The plague has killed over 2 million of our young in the past 3 years, said. His voice was quieter now, heavy with something that sounded like grief. My own son died in my arms. My daughter fights the disease even now, and the healers say she will not survive another month. Felt the weight of those words. He looked at, still holding his hand, and tried to imagine what it would be like to watch helplessly as a child slowly died. The Galactic Union refused to help us, continued. They said we were too dangerous, that we would use the treatment for weapons research. As if we care about weapons when our children are dying. We asked. We begged. We offered anything they wanted, and they turned us away. So you attacked a hospital, said. His eyes flashed with anger. We did what we had to do. When your children are dying and no one will help, you stop asking and start taking. Would your people do any differently? Thought about human history, about all the wars fought for less noble reasons than saving children. He thought about what parents would do when backed into a corner with no other options. No, he admitted, we probably wouldn't. Nodded, seeming to appreciate the honesty. So here we are. I have the station, I have the hostages, and soon I will have the treatment, whether the Union likes it or not. The only question is how many more must die before this ends. Took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been building toward, even if he hadn't known it. What if there was another way? Turned fully toward him, eyes narrowing. Explain. You're right that the Union was wrong to refuse you. Letting children die over politics is monstrous. But what you're doing now will only make things worse. Even if you get the treatment, the Union will hunt you. There will be war, more deaths, more suffering. We are already at war, growled. What difference does it make? It makes a difference to your children, said. The ones who are still alive. The ones who will grow up in whatever galaxy we leave them. Do you want them to inherit endless war, or do you want them to have a chance at something better? Was silent, his massive fists clenching and unclenching. Continued, I'm offering to help you, not as an enemy, not as a hostage, but as someone who wants to find a solution. Let me contact the Union. Let me explain what's really happening here. I'm human. My people are still neutral in this conflict. Maybe they'll listen to me when they wouldn't listen to you." "And why would you do this?" demanded. "What do you gain?" Looked at, the cub was watching him with wide eyes, hanging on every word. "I met one of your children today," said. "He was scared and alone and holding a weapon because it was the only thing that made him feel safe. And I realized that if I could help one child, maybe I could help more. Maybe I could help all of them." Stared at him for a long moment. The atrium was completely silent. Every soldier, every hostage, every survivor was watching the warlord and the human in the medical gown. "You are asking me to trust you," said finally. "To trust a human I met 10 minutes ago with the lives of my people." "Yes," said simply, "I am." Walked forward until he was standing directly in front of. The warlord towered over him, a mountain of muscle and fur and barely contained violence. Had to crane his neck to meet's eyes, but he didn't look away. "If you betray us," said quietly, "I will kill you, not quickly, not kindly. I will make you suffer for every child who dies because of your treachery." Nodded, "I understand." "And yet you still offer to help." "Yes." Was silent for another long moment. Then he reached down and did something that made everyone in the room gasp. He offered his hand. It was a human gesture, something they had learned from watching other species. But coming from a warlord in front of his soldiers, it meant something profound. It meant trust. It meant alliance. Took the massive paw and shook it firmly. "You have earned the right to speak," human said. "I will give you one chance. Contact your people. Make your case. But know that if this fails, we will take what we need by force, and nothing in this galaxy will stop us." Nodded. He had one chance to prevent a war, and he was standing in a medical gown with no weapons, no authority, and nothing but his words. He hoped it would be enough. The communications room was smaller than expected. Banks of equipment lined the walls, blinking with lights and humming with power. A technician worked at the main console while stood behind, arms crossed and face unreadable. Had been given a Galactic Union frequency to contact the nearest diplomatic vessel. His hands were shaking slightly as he prepared to speak. Everything depended on the next few minutes. The screen flickered to life and a face appeared. Ambassador, a senior diplomat with decades of experience, looked at with visible confusion. "This is Ambassador of the Galactic Union. You are transmitting from the occupied medical station. Identify yourself." "My name is Marsh. I'm a human cargo pilot. I was here for a medical procedure when they attacked." His eyes narrowed. "Are you a hostage? Are you being forced to make this transmission?" "No," said. "I'm here by choice. I'm speaking on behalf of Warlord and the forces." The ambassador's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. A human speaking for the explain. Took a deep breath. "Ambassador, I've spent the last few hours with the. I've talked to their soldiers and their leaders. I've held the hand of a cub whose father was killed in the assault. And I need you to understand something important. They're not here to conquer. They're here because their children are dying." He told the story as clearly as he could. The plague, the 2 million dead children, the Union's refusal to share the treatment, the desperation that had led to this attack. Listened without interrupting. When finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Even if what you say is true," she said finally, "it does not excuse an attack on a neutral medical facility. They have broken every law of civilized warfare. They must withdraw and face consequences." Felt his frustration rising. "And while they face consequences, more children die. Is that acceptable to you?" "It is not my decision to make. The Union has policies." "Then change the policies," said sharply. "Ambassador, I understand that rules exist for good reasons. I understand that the Dominion is dangerous and that sharing technology with them is a risk. But we're talking about children. Millions of children who could be saved if the adults in charge would just stop fighting long enough to help them. His expression softened slightly. You speak with passion, Mr. Marsh, but passion is not diplomacy. What exactly are you proposing? Looked at, then back at the screen. I'm proposing a compromise. The release all hostages and withdraw from the station immediately. In exchange, the Union shares the plague treatment under neutral supervision. Human observers can ensure it's used only for medical purposes. Both sides get what they need, and no more blood has to be spilled. Human observers raised an eyebrow. Why humans? Because we're neutral. We have no stake in the conflict between the Union and the Dominion, and because we come from the respect, they'll accept our presence where they might reject others. Was silent, clearly thinking. Behind shifted impatiently. This is an unusual proposal, said. It would require approval from the Union Council, and there are many who would oppose any deal with the Dominion after this attack. Then help me convince them, said. Ambassador, you have a chance right now to prevent a war. Thousands of people are on this station, hostages who are scared and waiting to die. Billions more on both sides will suffer if this conflict escalates. All of that can be avoided if we act now today in this moment. The ambassador looked at him for a long time. Could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes, the political considerations, and the practical concerns, and the weight of responsibility. Give me 2 hours, she said finally. I will speak with the council, but I make no promises. Nodded, thank you, Ambassador, that's all I ask. The screen went dark, turned to find watching him with an expression he couldn't read. You spoke well, the warlord said. Now we wait. The 2 hours were the longest of his life. He sat in the atrium with the other hostages, watching soldiers pace and check their weapons. Stayed by his side, the cub's small body pressed against his leg. Will it work? Asked quietly. Will they stop fighting? Put an arm around the cub's shoulders. I don't know, but I hope so. When the communications console finally beeped, everyone in the room turned to look, strode to the screen and activated it. Ambassador's face appeared again. Warlord, she said formally. The Union Council has reached a decision. We accept the terms proposed by the human Marsh. The plague treatment will be shared with the Dominion under human observation, and all hostages will be released immediately. His face showed no expression but could see his massive shoulders relax slightly. And my soldiers, what happens to them? Given the circumstances and the proposal of Mr. Marsh, the Council has agreed to a general amnesty for all involved in this operation. There will be no prosecutions. However, any future attacks on neutral facilities will be met with the full force of Union law. Nodded slowly, we accept. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Soldiers released hostages, who were escorted to waiting evacuation vessels. Medical staff rushed to treat the wounded from both sides. Diplomats arrived to hammer out the details of the agreement. Watched it all from a quiet corner of the atrium, still wearing his medical gown. He felt exhausted in a way he had never experienced before, like his soul had run a marathon. Doctor found him and insisted on completing his biopsy. The procedure took only a few minutes, and when the results came back, she smiled. Benign, she said. Nothing to worry about, you will be fine. Laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. He had spent the day preventing a war and saving thousands of lives, and the thing that had brought him here in the first place was nothing to worry about. As he recovered in a medical bed, came to visit. The cub was cleaned up now, his fur brushed and his eyes a little less haunted. Behind him walked Warlord. Tried to sit up, but waved him back down. Rest, human, you have earned it. The warlord reached into his belt and pulled out a long blade made of dark metal. It was covered in symbols and looked ancient. This is a honor blade, said. It has been in my family for 12 generations. It is given only to those who have shown extraordinary courage and integrity. I give it now to you, Marsh. You are a friend to the people. Took the blade carefully. It was heavier than it looked, and the metal seemed to glow slightly in the light. Thank you, he said. I'll treasure it. Nodded, then he looked at. The cub wishes to say something. Stepped forward, suddenly shy. Thank you for saving me, he said quietly, and for saving my people. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Smiled and ruffled the fur on his head. What do you want to be when you grow up? Thought for a moment. Maybe a healer, like the humans who will bring the medicine to my world. I want to help people instead of fighting them. Felt tears forming in his eyes. He blinked them away and nodded. I think you'll be a great healer, I really do. After they left, lay back in his bed and stared at the ceiling. Outside the window, warships were withdrawing, and Union vessels were arriving to provide aid. Somewhere out there, a cure was being prepared that would save millions of children. And it had all started because a human was scheduled for a biopsy, and a cub walked in with a plasma cannon. In the galactic records, historians would study this day for centuries. They would analyze the political factors and the diplomatic negotiations and the strategic decisions, but knew the truth that the historians would miss. It had all come down to something simple: a scared child who needed help and a human who was too stubborn to walk away. That was what made humans different, not their strength or their technology or their origins. It was their stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence that every life mattered, that every child deserved a chance, and that compassion was never weakness. Marsh closed his eyes and smiled. He had come to the station expecting to learn if he was dying. Instead, he had learned what it meant to truly live.